So let's go to the next feature that I want to talk about. This has to deal with DevOps, where we can work with, where we can do version control in Ignition, we can set up deployment modes, and we can use the REST API in Ignition. So let's talk about all three of those. But first I want to do is I want to show you that all the configuration in Ignition 8.3 is stored in the file system. So if we actually go to the install directory, here's the data directory that's there. In the data directory, all the configuration is there. So like before, all the projects are in here, and we can actually see in the projects. If I go to perspective, for example, here is our views, and I can actually see the individual views and the configuration of those views, right? Just as pure JSON, really simple. But what's now great in 8.3 is that all the configuration of the server, all the stuff that we did in the gateway, database connections and all that are now stored here in the file system. So if I go to resources, there's my core configuration. If I go to Ignition as an example, let's go take a look at database connection. And so there's my MariaDB connection, and there's the JSON for that. So everything is very simple. It's all there. We can see it in the install directory, but that makes it very easy for us to then connect that to Git so that we can see that in a version control system. So let's show how we would set that up real quick. I'm going to come over here. We're going to do some commands here. So for those of you not familiar with Git, it's okay. Don't worry. We're not. It's really easy if we wanted to. I'm in the data directory here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this one up as I'm going to knit this as I want to set this as a repository, right, to my repository. And so I'm going to do a couple commands. I'm going to add the remote origin. I'm going to a GitLab that I have installed on my local machine. I'm going to do an initial commit. So I'm going to add all the files that are here. And after that, I'm going to do my initial commit. Let's go ahead and push that to our repo. And so I have an empty repository right now in GitLab. And by doing this, I'm basically pushing all that config into it. So it'll be done here in just a moment. And I'll be able to see all that in my version control system. So we'll go ahead now. Now it's ready to go. Let's go ahead and refresh this, and you'll see that this is now my config is my repository is now got all the files. Let's go make a change. Let's go into our tag, and let's say that this engineering units here is a percentage or PSI from 0 to 45, let's say. And there we go. Now I've made a change, and let's go ahead and use now, instead of using the command line tools, let's use GitHub Desktop for this. So I'm going to real quickly add this directory and then bring this over. And so here you can see that now I've got a change, and the change is to that writable tags. You can see the engineering high, engineering unit was changed. And I can commit this, so change a tag. I could change anything I want. You would see those happening. I'm gonna push that to my repository. And so once that pushes to the repository, I will be able to see those commits and those changes that are happening across all of the configuration in Ignition, from the gateway side all the way, of course, to projects. Everything that we would have would be in there. So that part, it just allows us to do that complete version control. So it's very exciting to have that. So all right, so that's been pushed. Let's go ahead and refresh this page, because you'll see that there's now a change to tag commit. If I go look at that one in particular, I can see the change of that tag that we showed. So, so really, it's great to be able to use this and leverage, tools like Git. Of course, you can use GitHub if you like to. You can use GitLab if you want something local. Lots of options for that. All right, along with that is how we can set up development, testing, and production environments. And we're making that process a lot easier now. So if I go to platform, we've added a new thing in Ignition called deployment modes. Deployment modes is where we can set up different modes, different configurations of Ignition for different environments that we want to go into. So it's environmental awareness that we're setting up. So if I create a mode for development, I now got a development mode. I can go to things like a database connection. And right now, this configuration is part of the core. So there's a kind of a hierarchy set up that we have inheritance model, and it goes core, and then I have our different modes. And what I can do is I can actually put an override for our development mode. And I can say in that override, let's go ahead and show this. You can see here's the core and there's the development. And if I wanted to, I can actually go into that development and change something, like I can change, the IP address, something different, change the password, whatever it is. And what's cool, I'll go ahead and do that. So let's say I change the URL. That config is all in the file system. So in fact, you'll notice that if I look at my resources, there's core, and then now there's development, and development, there's my override for the database connection, and so that has the different IP address. When I take the backup of this gateway and move it to my development environment, I can actually mark my development environment as being development. So you can see this Ignition server here up the top left, it has development. If I go look at my database connections, not that one, database connections, you can see that that's just the one I'm using is development, and core is down below because this is not the production environment. In my case, I'm using core as the production environment. But you can set up however you want, and it gives you, so one backup holds all the config for different environments, but each environment is set up in a different mode, and it only runs that configuration in that mode. But I would see all of that configuration in our version control system. I would know exactly what happened. In fact, if I open up the GitHub desktop, you can see that development got those new changes in that development folder. So it's a great new way to really have that environmental separation, environmental awareness built into Ignition, so it makes your job easier. I could just simply move my config from dev to testing to prod. I don't have to worry about which config do I need to move exactly. It'll all happen for you if you set up the right model there for how you want that configuration to be inherited. All right, so last thing that we're going to show here today is the brand new REST API built into Ignition 8.3. And this REST API is so powerful. What's really cool about this new gateway web interface is that everything you see in this gateway web interface is all going against the REST API is built into Ignition. There's nothing everything that's visible here is visible to a third-party application, to prospective projects, to vision projects. It's all ready to go, and you can simply take advantage of that. So what we have to do for this is, under security, we have to set up a API key. So I don't have an API key. Oops, let me go here. Wrong one. Let's go over to my API keys here. I got an API key set up. It's really simple. You can go create a token. You have to give it a role, security level that is has permissions associated to either read or write to using the API. But I've got one set up already, and I'm going to use like Postman or any kind of tool to the interface with that API. Now, what you can do is actually, if I go to a new tab, I can slash OpenAPI at the end, and you can actually see all the endpoints that are there. So, for example, if I want to look for devices, if I want to alter, devices or get information about devices or databases within Ignition, I can go. You can see, let's say I want to see all of the list device resources. I want to see all the devices that are there. This gives you what endpoints are all in the system. We can then use that a third-party tool, or again, call that REST API. I'm going to use Insomnia here for Mac, and I've got a few different endpoints set up. So I actually have in my environment, I've actually got my token set up that I created earlier that goes in our header, and I have these these different endpoints to look at it. So if you're, for example, there's an endpoint at /data/API v1 to list all of the OPC UA devices. If I do that, I can see there's my dairy device, the simulator, and there's my another programmable simulator that is my just called simulator, and I can actually see the config. I can also see metrics. So here I can see the status, and these are both running. If it was faulted, we would see that we would know it's faulted and all of that right here. Let's go to our database connections. I have a database connection for MariaDB. There's all the config for that database connection, and I get all of the metrics too. I even get active connections, queries, throughput, all these different numbers you get as well. So all the metrics, again, everything we see in the web UI is now accessible in this API. Let's say though that we want to add something new. I want to add a new OPC UA device, right? So if I go to our gateway, go to connections and go to devices, I have these two simulators. Let's say I want to add a Modbus connection. All I gotta do is call that endpoint to post to the device endpoint. The body is gonna be a new Modbus, simple JSON config that we'd see if you looked at the file system, what that would look like. I'm gonna post that in there, and again, in my header, I have the token, so it's all ready to go. Let's go ahead and send it. that was created. And now you can see I've got a Modbus device that is not going to connect, but it was easily added through that REST API. There are just so many endpoints that you could work with. Again, if you go look at the OpenAPI, you can see them. And what's great is modules will add new endpoints and automatically is dynamic when those things are added. We're going to add more endpoints as we go forward for not just configuration, but for our systems like to even query historian data. All of that will be adding more to the API now that it's built in to Ignition. It just gives you so much flexibility with what you can do, and you can use third-party tools like Ansible or or just show this data inside your projects, or IT tools can work with it. Of course, when you're doing or using orchestration platforms and be able to deploy config out there dynamically, you can leverage all these tools that we have between the version control, between deployment modes and REST API. There's so many options for how you can deploy and work with Ignition.